everyone can identify with their home, but I think Bedford is particularly special. It is a small town. My name is Ed Booth. I grew up in Bedford, lived here off and on all my life. I started elementary school in 1936. As a matter of fact, I always think about those days in Bedford. Bedford is the home of the National D-Day Memorial. People attend the memorial. It gives them the opportunity to look back in time to another day, a very critical day.
It's kind of special here because your person on the street knows the story and appreciates the service and understands. You go anywhere in the Army and they all know Alpha Company in Bedford. I'm Howard Holt, Sergeant First Class, Platoon Sergeant in Company A, 1st to 116th here in Bedford. 20 years ago, I was a young private, and we had a captain from Stanton, Virginia, who told us a story about Alpha Company from Bedford. Company A got deployed at the beginning of World War II. Later, of course, ended up on Omaha Beach and took all the terrible casualties.
It wasn't as though these people were people that you didn't know who they were. Well, everyone knew who they were. And little did they think that one day they were going to be on the beach, and it wasn't going to be Virginia Beach. It was Normandy Beachhead. So the innocents came to a very quick end as they hit that beach.
60 years later, Company A got called up again to go to Afghanistan. When we were called up in 2004, it was the first time since World War II Company A as a whole was deployed anywhere. And we all marched up to the courthouse steps and took a picture. Back in World War II, the guys back then did the same thing. They took a picture before they left. It was almost surreal. It was kind of strange that we were kind of going in their footsteps. I remember one of the soldiers was kind of like, this doesn't feel right in a way, because what happened to those guys, in World War II, not that he wasn't proud, but the results for A Company wasn't good.
For the first time since the Allied invasion of Normandy, the Bedford boys head into combat.
I just have a real sadness in my heart for anybody that goes overseas anymore. And I tried my best to make myself go down there to see those men leave, and somehow I couldn't do it. I think I was thinking about the men who left here in World War II, and it just brought back a lot of that memory. I felt like I wasn't very patriotic by not going, and I felt real guilty about not going. But somehow or another, I didn't want to see these men go off to war. I was worried that they might not come back. Just before the war, Bedford was fairly agricultural. Our family was very much like most of the families in Bedford. Of course, I was in high school, lived on a farm, and had to milk cows before going to school. We lived right across from the Center Point Methodist Church, where my father was treasurer for 50 years. And the church at that time was center of the social life for a country family, and so we looked forward to going to church.
Well, it was a very small town, of course. The biggest thing to go see a baseball game on Saturday afternoon. I mean, it was just the simplicity, I said, of getting on your bicycle and riding to school and having the dogs run with you. I think even the teacher let me have my dog come in 2nd grade with me. We were living in the 19th century in many ways.
Well, in the late 30s, Bedford had 2 or 3 department stores. I know Leggett's was here, Ralph Lowe's was here. There was a store called Wilkinson's. And so we had enough in Bedford to supply our needs.
The population of the city was something like 3,000. We did have a number of interests in the town of Bedford at that time. My older brothers, Bedford and Raymond, one worked at Rubbertex, and one worked for the highway department. Raymond was very quiet, very reserved, very religious, and didn't have a lot to say. Bedford was a little bit like me. He was kind of outgoing and kind of full of life and loved people, so they were exact opposites. And he and Raymond both joined the National Guard.
We joined the Guards because all our buddies was with us. You know, every time we turned around, they was in the National Guard. So we joined just because they got it, mostly.
They were pretty patriotic, but they also, the extra money they got.
It was $1. The pay each drill was $1.
We were, pretty poor back then, and we didn't have any spending money much. And once a week, you just spend a couple hours training or drilling, and you get $1 for it. $1 was a lot of money back then.
And then in the summertime, you'd go for a couple of weeks.
You get $15, 2 weeks, $15.
It was at my school, and he came to a basketball game there. I just met him standing on the sideline, started talking, I guess. He was a heavy-set guy, had real auburn, pretty hair. And, of course, I thought he was a good-looking guy. He says, well, I'm John Wilkes. I guess I did say I'm Betty. And he says, yes, I know your name. I guess it started from there. There was things to be done, in town for young people. We liked to go bowling, liked to go to the movies, and he liked to dance, and I did too. I think that it takes a while for you to really find out somebody, but I think that I just decided that he was the one I wanted. He got leave. We went to North Carolina and got married. I remember being at a movie on Sunday afternoon when they put the newspaper out about Pearl Harbor. When we came out of the theater, of course we bought a copy.
This bulletin just in. Shortly before 8 o'clock local time this morning, Japanese planes launched a surprise attack on the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. This unprovoked assault, which has been going on
We were getting a report that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. There were casualties, and there was some damage. And at the time, they believed that the Japanese fleet had withdrawn, and they still were a possibility of an invasion of the Hawaiian Islands.
I remember everybody gathering around the radio and listening, and you weren't even allowed to move because everybody was so glued to the radio listening. And I think from then on, we were all apprehensive and frightened and worried. And I know my parents were, and I think whenever they are, that the children feel the same worry.
Mr. Boyd, the principal, seemed so shy, and my dad, the fact that the Japanese were able to do this. And they thought, how in the world could a Japanese fleet sail from Japan to Pearl Harbor and not be spotted? We knew it was bad, but we didn't know the extent of it. And then, of course, the next day was Roosevelt's Day of Infamy speech, and we listened to it in school.
To tell you what we did now, we went to this little pub down there where they sold beer. After 2 or 3 beers, we whipped the Japs that night, see? so that's the way it was. We was young, we didn't know. We just following the leader.
Well, we were still living a nice, peaceful little existence here in Bedford, and we were reading about the war in Europe and the war in Asia. And all of a sudden, we were part of it, and we knew that the guys from here are going to be going. And particularly, the first thing that came to our mind was, of course, the National Guard unit. And all of a sudden, everyone's life had changed drastically.
Oh, Johnny, oh, Johnny, oh. Do you know that one? Well, of course, the only reason I knew it was because it was Oh, Johnny. The name of it is Oh, Johnny, oh. His name is John Burrell Skank. Very handsome man. He was small features and small stature, sort of. He and I were about the same height and build. He had a beautiful smile and pretty hair and nice blue eyes. He was a very fine man. When we met each other, we talked until about 4 o'clock the next morning.
I think we both knew that it was real. We had a beautiful setting for our wedding. He was dressed in his uniform, and I had gone and went to a special sale in Roanoke, and for $25, I bought shoes, my dress, and my hat. We didn't have any money to amount to anything. We approached a married couple who owned what they called honeymoon cottage. All night we could hear the beautiful Jennings Creek flowing down below. We didn't want to be in public places, and we just enjoyed being with each other and living together about 8 days in that quiet, secluded area. It was just exactly what both of us wanted. And my husband got in this little apartment, and I went on down to Florida, caught a midnight train out of Bedford. It was about like a troop train. It was nothing but soldiers practically on it. Rode that train till midnight the next night, pulled into Camp Landing. All I could see, it looked like a whole field of soldiers. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? Took one of my suitcases and was getting off the train, and there stood John. So thank goodness for that, he rescued me. We went over to camp visiting, during the day a lot after the other girls began to come down. I had my little brownie camera along, and I think I still have some of the pictures that I took with that little camera. We got around and had a good time while they were there. We were all together on the grounds there that evening. All the girls, their husbands, and Edith's boyfriend, we just sat around and talked, and this one guy came by, and I had, of course, my little brownie camera, and John asked him to take a picture. And he did. He took a picture of all of us. And finally, about dusk, John says, okay, man, fall in. We gotta go. It was the 22nd day of September, 1942. That was the last time that we saw him.
Late in September 1942, we boarded the Queen Mary in New York. Now, this was exciting to me, I've never been on the Queen Mary like that before.
I was a 16-year-old kid that didn't really know what the score was. We had about 12,000 troops on board. We left on sunny weather. It was nice, and as we eased out of the harbor there in New York, we could see the Statue of Liberty. Everything was smooth and nice, and it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, we had a time on that thing. That thing would roll with us.
Some of the guys played poker and so forth. The food was terrible. We were on British rations.
But anyway, it was nice. It was one nice ship that you want to be on.
We were zigzagging across. Every 7 minutes we had to change course because we were in the Luftwaffe area. And the German U-boats were also managed that part of the ocean. It was a very pleasant journey until we got to within 500 miles of our destination. The British sent an escort out, a light cruiser, the Carousel, and several destroyers. And then we zigged when we should have zagged, I guess, when we hit this Carousel midships. It was cut in two, killing 332 British sailors. We couldn't stop. We threw life preservers and buoys out, but we couldn't slow down or anything because of we were in the range of the Luftwaffe.
I know that when that Hoback boy took a picture of the Queen Mary after we got off, and there's a good big hole in that ship, as big as this house almost.
When they came with all their military might, with all their power, they brought something fresh to England. If America hadn't have come, we would have lost the war. So the word allies to me as a child meant men who'd come to support us and help us.
After that, we went to Tidworth, England. We trained extensively there for about a year, about 7 days a week. But we really didn't get into amphibious training until after we left Tidworth. The whole thing about England, they should have took it out down by Mexico somewhere and dried it out and brought it back in there, but it stayed damp and wet over there a lot.
The soft rolling gentle hills down here, the farmland, and we're so close. We have the moor, we have the sea. I have found this to be the most beautiful part of the world. Indeed, when I went into full-time work, full-time ministry, I said to the Lord, I'll serve you anywhere in the world as long as it's within 20 miles of Saltash Bridge. And Saltash Bridge is the bridge that takes you over into Cornwall. Ivy Bridge is 15 miles north of Plymouth. It's called the gateway to the moor because it's on the edge of the south side of Dartmoor. Ivy Bridge has got the River Elm running through the centre of it, with the river coming straight off the moor. It's beautiful. There is a bridge across the river called the Ivy Bridge, and that's how it got its name. It was a very old town, but there are still a lot of the old natives, and they speak in a broad South Devon accent, which most of us can't understand.
My father was originally an electrician, but after that he came to Ivy Bridge to set up a news agency business. And then the war came, and practically everything came in short supply, including money. So we boys were growing up, so we were on paper boys. Ivy Bridge, during 1943, was a village. The population was about 1,500. One of the things that used to entertain the boys were the pubs. There were 7 in the village by itself. The first one that you come to was the Sportsman's. In the Sportsman's was Vera Luckham, an elegant lady, always well presented.
And my in-laws had this pub. There's a small country pub. So I'd been brought up in the licence trade, so I understood it. And so I ran the pub for them. I suppose it's different today. I've been out of it for so long. I've been out of it since 55. Now I'm telling everybody how old I am. I left Kent, really, to get away from it all. But Plymouth caught it far worse. People used to come out every night from Plymouth, come out in buses and even on bicycles to get away from Plymouth when it was being bombed. We used to stand out in the fields, which is now part of this pub, and watch the planes coming over and Plymouth being bombed. There was nothing left of Plymouth. That was frightening. We just have to try and, well, get on with life. Probably had another gin and tonic.
The Doodlebug is a huge rocket that the Germans invented. They had huge ramps which they took off from the Low Countries, and they came across to England. They had a turbo engine mounted on the top, and that's what made the noise. And it was all exciting to watch it up in the clouds, but then the engine cut out. Now, the first time it happened, I remember distinctly, we wondered what was happening. The tremendous explosion that came. But from then on, while the engine was going, we felt fine. But as soon as the engine stopped, the stark terror that gripped your heart. Remember, I was only 5 years of age. And the stark terror that gripped you. Where is the wretched thing going to land? Where is it going to come down? I lost a younger brother. He was only weeks old. The house next door got a direct hit, and the wall came in and fell on little Michael, and Michael was crushed. Life was lived on the edge all the time. There was never any time that we weren't in fear because the shells landing all the time. And that is a fear I've never forgotten. Never forgotten. We were preparing for invasion. My father sort of shielded us a bit against that. And he didn't talk about it, but you could see the look in my mother's face when the air raid started. My father wouldn't tell me, but I learned many years later through my mother, if the Germans had invaded, he was going to shoot us. He wouldn't let us fall into the hands of the Germans. That's how much they feared the Germans.
But of course the Americans made a big difference in our lives altogether because it was so exciting. We'd only seen Americans on films.
At first, the people that didn't accept us, we didn't accept them. We were pretty rowdy, and some of the guys were chasing after the girls and getting drunk.
But they didn't really misbehave. A few of them had a few drinks and a few more than they should have done. But we never had any trouble at all. And the children used to love it because they got these beautiful Hershey bars. I like them too, they were lovely.
The population of Ivory is being something like 1,500. When they arrived, it doubled the population. And to see them walking about the street, I said, hooray, somebody's on our side at last. Yes, that's the way I felt about it as a boy.
Everywhere in the nation, we appreciated these men coming to us, and we wanted to show them that we appreciated them.
The people of Ivory did what they could to make the Americans feel at home. And it's so strange to go into an English pub. For an American who'd never been in an English pub to drink warm beer.
They liked cold beer. They liked everything with ice, you see. So we just, we bought a refrigerator and kept as much as we could in the refrigerator. That's the only thing we could do.
And to have stale sandwiches, that's something they never heard of or seen before in their lives. And they must have thought they'd gone back 1,000 years when they came here. You must remember that we were severely rationed. And my mother had to make do for a week on what I eat for my supper nowadays.
Here's a plan that's fair and square. Everybody gets their share. No more griping anywhere. Get the point, Mrs. Brown. One for you and one for me.
Everybody worked and supported the war effort in every way that they could.
I think everybody was trying to help out during the war. People would go to the library and roll bandages.
Saving different materials to help the war effort and buying war bonds and all those things.
We didn't have much money, but every time you had an extra dime or something, you bought a different stamp. You tried to fill the little book up so you could buy a bond. And so I guess all the children at that time were saving all their money. That's when maybe the women felt like they had to step in and do some of the things that they had depended on the men to do before.
Even at Army proving grounds, the so-called weaker sex is doing a man-sized job. Testing tanks is just daily routine for this all-girl crew.
Several from here went to Baltimore to work in Glenn Martin Aircraft. A lot of the women who had never worked would go to Rubbertex and help out. They were making gas masks and things there.
Well, really, everybody was busy because most everybody worked. Of course, our main thing that we wanted was to hear from the man.
Both of us wrote almost every day that we were separated. He in England, and I over here.
My darling husband, this bright sunny day reminds me that I love you and want you so much I can't even begin to measure my feelings. I woke up at 9 when the alarm went off. True to form, I went back to sleep and dreamed you were home.
My precious Lynn, I love you very much. Even more than I did when I woke up this morning.
I really believe my love for you is growing more and more each day.
Oh, how I adore you, and want to help you make a home that God will be proud of. One with children, where we'll be having a heap of fun and finding things to enjoy for years and years. How I'd like to tell you all this in person. How wonderful the day you come back will be.
Cheerio, my darling. Keep the home fires burning, because we are going to win this war and be home real soon. I hope. Good night, my precious. I love you.
He would write the whole page until he got down there where he didn't have any more space, and he would sign his name right by 3 little dots that meant I love you. Very meaningful and dear to me. You really couldn't make any plans the way things were then. We didn't talk too much about those things because we didn't know how things were going to go. We sent packages to them pretty often. I did, John. You know, toilet articles, cigarettes, candy, whatever we thought they needed, you know.
Yeah, those letters have been a whole lot, especially the packages that has come from home. It's had a lot of goodies in it, you know.
We began to write. His sister asked me to write, and I did. And I began to hear much as he could tell, which wasn't too much.
The company commander was a man by the name of Taylor Fellers. Actually, I was related to them. Fellers was a cousin of mine. He was a captain. I was first lieutenant, and second in command to him. But he was a great man.
Taylor was the oldest, and we all looked up to him. In some of his letters, he would mention what a good group he had. They were good soldiers, and that he hoped he could bring them all back home. Well, of course, you miss them. You write lots of letters, and we did a lot of waiting at the mailbox to get answers and all. But there were so many families like that. He spent many nights writing on his typewriter in the edge of the tent so he could get the light from the tent.
My precious John, your wife is really a happy girl today. Reason? 3 typewritten V letters.
My precious Lynn, you can see by the papers we are staying quite busy. So glad that you had a most enjoyable Christmas. As for myself, things could have been much better. Here I am, daydreaming, and the war's a long way from being over. The longer I stay over here, the more homesick I become. When I went to Bedford, I thought the green countryside was very much like Ivy Bridge in the woodland area. The boys used to exercise quite a bit in the elm wood. They also used to use the same woodland area for their physical training, where they would be running with their packs on. So when I visit that area now, it always comes back, and every time I go up there, I never forget it. Being a boy that age, doing the newspaper rounds was a bit of a bind, you know. I wanted to be doing what the other boys were doing. But I'm not saying this because you chaps are here, but as soon as I got on camp, I never thought of it. I didn't have to. The chaps took over.
Yeah, I can understand what he was thinking, this young fella. What he saw in the American soldiers, they stood out just a little bit taller than we really were.
You must have heard that saying, the trouble with the Yanks, they're overpaid, they're oversexed, and they're over here.
He thought we were something because of soldiers. We wasn't perfect at all, you know. And they wanted to learn everything they could and do whatever you did. You had to be careful what you say and think, because they want to imitate you.
Talking of the woods, and I used to go up there, and to the local people, it's known as Lover's Walk. And the boys of the 1st Battalion made good use of it, I think. I was walking up there on occasion with a group of other lads, and some of them were older. And I could see these white balloons every so often, like, And I said to him, he wants to throw white balloons around like this. And of course, there was a moment's silence, and then a lot of giggling and laughing. And then they explained to me what they were for. That's how I come to learn my first lesson about the birds and the bees.
They used to go out on the nervous. But the villagers seemed to know, oh, they'll be back, they'll be back. See? I don't know how they knew, but they seemed to know that they were coming back, and they did. But the last time they went, they wasn't singing, and we knew that we shouldn't see it again.
The time they came to leave Ivy Bridge, I happened to be on camp that morning, and they were filing out, and I knew then that they were going out. Why I knew that, I don't know.
When we actually left for good, everybody from Ivy Bridge was sticking their heads out the windows and waving and crying and so forth.
I think there were more tears shed that day than any other time, because they were such lovely lot of chaps.
They were such friends by this time. I'd been with them, some of them, for 2 years. They'd been in and around, in and out of home. So that was a sad moment for me when they left.
I was born in Bristol on the 4th of July 1921. In my early years, I used to wander down to the docks at Bristol and watch the ships come in. And I thought when I grew up, I'd like to go on one of those ships and explore lands overseas. As soon as Britain declared war, I thought I would like to play my part. In 1943, I went on a series of training courses, and I joined my flotilla in Plymouth, early 1944. We were waiting for our troop ship, the Empire Javelin, to come from America, where it had been built and converted to take 18 LCAs, landing craft assault, black lifeboats, hanging over the side of the ship. In April, we were ordered down to Weymouth to take on board some troops. They looked like country lads from Devon or Somerset. They were friendly and open and wanting to make friends. So the first time we'd met these troops, we found out they were the 116th from Bedford. Then I think we realised that these were the troops that we were going to have later on.
You could just see that something big was happening, and yet we had no idea that it was going to be us.
It's a good thing I didn't have sense enough knowledge getting into it, really. Because if I did, probably would have lost it. We've been exercising for month after month with troops doing various types of landing. We had no idea where we were going, but we knew we were going to be involved, and we knew we were going to be in the front line. I think we wanted to get on and get the job done. Early in June, we were called down to Weymouth. And then it was revealed that Normandy was the place where we were going.
They told us that we would be, the 1st Battalion, 116th was going to land on Omaha Beach, Dog Green, one of the toughest of all the beaches.
Well, I thought about it, and I thought about it a lot. And I thought, we got to stay now. We're here for the duration. We got to put up with it. We got to do it.
We all wanted to be first. The way home was through Berlin. We knew that. But we felt like with all of this equipment that we were watching build up, by Christmas we'd be going home. The war would be over.
Ray was my twin brother. We were born on my mother's birthday, August 12, 1919. We were raised together, never was separated. Whenever we'd go courting, we went together, And then when they joined the National Guard, we got together on that. So we never were separated till June 6th. Originally, we were due to sail on the 4th of June and land at 5:30 in the morning, and the next wave was supposed to come in an hour later. So we became known as the suicide wave because we were there for an hour on our own. In fact, we did sail briefly out of port on the 4th of June. So it was a rough sea, and we were told then the invasion had been postponed for 24 hours. So again, we sailed on the 5th of June, and we had to anchor some 15 miles off the Point of Rock, about 3 o'clock or something in the morning. Before D-Day, I went to bed quite early and deliberately, because I knew the following day I had a job to do. I had to get up early.
Well, my father always said when Walter Winchell spoke, I didn't, because he would have us to sit in the living room, and we all had to listen to it whether we wanted to or not. I'm sure my parents were very, very worried that my brothers, that they were going to be involved, and I don't know that we ever really realized the seriousness of it. I think my older brother did a little bit more than Raymond, because Bedford used to say, well, I may not come home.
I remember clanging of the general alarm got us all awake. But as I opened the blackout blinds, I looked up towards France. You could just see it just looked like a big, giant sunrise. But it was the Air Force dropping their bombs on something. It wasn't on Omaha Beach, but it was probably inland somewhere. Just an exciting thing to watch, and I thought, who in the world can withstand all that?
On D-Day, my responsibility was for the first wave, which was 6 landing craft, 6 LCAs. I was responsible for bringing in a company of the 116th Regiment, which were about 200 men, with Captain Taylor Fellows as their commanding officer. It was my job to land them at Omaha Beach, Vieira-sur-Mer, at 6:30 in the morning, exactly. At the time of Normandy, I was 22 years old, and I was the first lieutenant of 551 Flotilla.
As we assembled on deck, waiting for orders to embark on the landing craft, I went around shaking hands with my buddies, and some of us were keyed up like going to a football game. The loudspeaker was Eisenhower giving a speech.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
I didn't pay much attention to it, but when they handed out the leaflets with the speech on it, for some reason, I had my buddy's autograph. I folded it up in a piece of plastic, stuck it in my pocket, and carried it all the way through the war.
There we was unloading onto our landing crafts. That's where I met Ray. He and I agreed to meet at Verville-sur-Mer at the crossroad, and I shook his hand that day. And he extended his hand for me to shake. And I said, no, I'll shake your hand there. But that's bothered me since I didn't, because he kept telling me he'd never make it. I tried to tell him just quit thinking like that. And it looked like he just dropped his head, and that was it.
Launching wasn't very successful because it was so rough. We had never launched in those conditions. The LCA bounced up and down, and it was a difficult craft to control.
I've never seen water so rough. They took those little boats and fly them around like the feathers in the air.
Might say it had on its southern bridges. Acted up.
Water was cold, we were sick, scared, and then the noise. I've never heard such a noise in all my life. You couldn't hear yourself. Now, the reason I say this because the boy was up in front of me when our boat hit that obstacle. He was trying to tell me that it was leaking, and I couldn't hear him. That's how loud it was.
I turned round and I saw LCA 911 behind me disappear beneath the waves. We were ordered not to stop at any cost to pick up the survivors. We didn't have room anyway.
I couldn't swim. I held on to my life preserver. We floated around out there for about 2.5 hours. But that boat, that's the reason I'm talking to you. If that boat had gone in, chances are I wouldn't be talking to you at all.
I told Taylor Fellows where we were about to land, and he discussed that his men had never seen action. And he was concerned about how they would behave under fire. And he said if I could fire over their heads as they went out the beach, it would give them confidence. The LCA couldn't go any further. We stopped and lowered the ramp, and the troops got out in the surf. Before Taylor Fellows left, he said thank you to me for getting us on here on time. And I said, good luck, Taylor. And he was gone. He was first man out of the boat, and there was no question that Taylor Fellows was the first man to land in France from the sea. When I left the beach, he was still there. I don't think I ever discovered until years after the end of the war exactly what happened to those troops. I think one of the lasting memories I have of the 116th was when they first came on board. And they looked at me, and I could see, I thought, the trust in their eyes. And there was a sort of glance between one of the soldiers and myself. I always remember that look. It was a look of trust, you know, I'm here. You're going to take us in, and my life is in your hands.
This is a farewell to my brother. I'll try to read it to you. I'll never forget that morning. It was the 6th day of June. I said farewell to brother. Didn't think it would be so soon. I had prayed for our future, that wonderful place called home. But sinners' prayers never end. I was in England for 4 days after I sank and took us back over to Normandy. It was at the same spot that we was to land that day. Boats was all piled up on one another. The bodies were still there. 8 company got slaughtered, and Ray, my twin brother, was one of those. I went on over to the cemetery where they buried him, and the first grave I came to was his. His dog tags had a piece of dirt on it, and I remember knocking it off, and it was his dog tags. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't think it could happen to him. But not only that, I found Captain Fellows, Hobacks, Powers, several others was killed from the 8 company. And like I tell you, if I hadn't mind go ahead and sunk, I would have been in it too. Now, fellas, take my warning. Believe it from start to end. If you have a twin brother, don't go to battle with him. Written by Tech Sergeant Roy Stevens, Company A, 116th Infantry, APO 29. I don't hardly remember writing it. That's something. Yep, quite a thing. That brings him back after 60-some years.
We were all getting awfully anxious because it was a long time that we didn't hear from them after D-Day.
Mama and I would just sit by the radio and listen what we said. God, if you could just save him, do it, and if you have to take him, take care of him and give him comfort.
Well, that's where the telegrams came in, you know. They had a nice soda fountain, and you could go there for sodas and sandwiches. And it was called Green's Drugstore.
Yes, it was the happy place, but also the sad place in the community, because all the men who were wounded or killed came through Elizabeth Tays, who was the telegraph operator at that time.
We didn't know about the casualties until the middle of July. My mother worked at the courthouse, and when she came home that day at lunch, she said something, it's awful. I said, what do you mean? And she said, we've lost a lot of Bedford boys. I said, oh my gosh. And then it started coming more, and it got worse and worse and worse as the summer went on.
There were so many telegrams coming in that they had a hard time even delivering them.
Hell on earth.
Torture. And so we had crying and expressing grief over him. There's no way to tell you how I felt. We were getting ready to go to church, and we had a fairly good-sized family, so when we didn't show up, they knew that something was happening. But just as we were getting ready to go to church, then was when the first telegram came, and the sheriff, Mr. Marshall, brought the telegram to the door. So my sister Rachel and I decided on Monday that, well, we'll go in the basement and make some ice cream and make Mom and Dad feel better. And then the second telegram came on Monday.
I had fixed a package over the weekend to send to John, and I had started in the drugstore when this lady, an acquaintance of mine, across the street called my name and says, "Wait a minute." Of course, her boyfriend was in Company A, so I first asked her if she had any mail. Have you gotten any mail? And she says, "Yes, today." And I says, "Oh, good. What did it say?" She says, "Well, she called her friend by name, wrote that John was killed yesterday." I don't remember much after that. I guess I'm sure I didn't go in the drugstore.
I can't say for sure, but I would say less than 10 survived the war. That's my most prized possession that I brought back from World War II. I see the names, and their faces are like they were back 62 years ago. Well, they were my buddies, you know. You lived with them for a long, long time. They're long gone now. They're only a memory.
I guess when A Company was going at World War II, it's back here in Bedford, they had no idea about D-Day or the invasion. It took them weeks, you know, to find out. Whereas now, at least by the next day, everybody knows about a battle or a crash, so they find out instantly. My wife said while we were gone, she'd watch the news and stuff, and then she quit watching the news because she was kind of on pins and needles, and all the wives were.
My boss came in, and her husband had called and said there was a helicopter crash at Bagram. And we all knew that they were over in Bagram and they were getting ready to fly out, so we had a pretty good feeling that it may be them, may not be them, but you never, you don't know. So we waited. I finally got an email from Howard, surprisingly, and he said that it wasn't them. That was probably one of the days, too, that it just kind of sunk in that, anything could happen at any point in time, and you just wanted it over at that point. You wanted them to come home at that point.
Close to about 17, 18 months after we left, we came home and brought everybody home, but didn't lose anybody. So that was a great feeling.
This is my son, Matthew Offenbacher. This is Susan's husband, Raymond Charlie. Michelle's husband, Douglas Moore.
Of course, they were doing everything, making signs, getting donations from the community. They got trailers for us to do a parade. And everybody piled on the trailers, leaving from the D-Day Memorial. It started raining. Nobody minded a bit. And everybody shut down and came out to see us come through and wave to us. Roy Stevens showed up, and that was a real surprise, and it was great. Everybody loved it, and it was a good welcome home. When I came home, I think the biggest thing was a relief that, she wouldn't be on her own doing all this work anymore. And I'd be able to be home to help some. And of course, she wouldn't have the worry. My son was a year old when we left, and he was almost 3 when we came home. He had learned to talk in sentences, and when I left, it was just dead eye. That's about all he could say. I think the weirdest thing for me that I remember when I got home was getting out of bed and walking on carpet. It was a feeling I didn't have for 18 months, and be able to walk around barefoot in my house. And that was just the best thing in the world.
Hey, Dad. Dad. Dee. Once again, officially welcome home. good to have you here. Being a Bedford County native, I've always been mesmerized by the history of A Company.
The thing that hit me more than anything was that it was all over. And everybody was home safe, but it was really hard seeing those people that were my platoon, my guys. 38 guys would go all their separate ways, and we'd never be a group again. Sir, it's a great pleasure. My friend. We're very proud of you, my friend. I knew these guys better than I knew my own family. And nobody can understand it except those guys that were that small group. It's a real bond that nobody else has.
The Booth family did not suffer in World War II and have a great sacrifice. That sacrifice was to come many years later. Josh was my grandson. We really miss him.
We would always talk about the history of Bedford, and of course I got that from my father, and then Josh got it from me, and then he got double dose when we would come to Bedford. I think probably the best way to describe the realization that Josh had of the Bedford veterans and that connection to his desire to make the Marines his career is the D-Day Memorial here in Bedford. It had not yet opened, but it had been almost completed. And so we went over there on a Sunday morning, a real beautiful day. He told me at that time that he was going to be an officer and leader of Marines. I said, Josh, I'm not really comfortable with you doing that. Just look at this example here. You had the 39 boys from Bedford that were in assault craft, just like this memorial shows us here. And when the door dropped to their assault craft, there were pillboxes and German machine guns pouring lead into them, and that's not the kind of thought I want to have for you. And he said, Dad, think about the boys from Bedford. When they were in those assault craft, and before they went on that beach, they didn't know if the battle was going to be successful. What if they had questioned that? We visited Josh and Erica in August, and he was to be deployed to Iraq in September. And he said, Dad, I need to talk to you. We've got to go in and face the enemy face to face. And there's a good chance I won't make it back. And you need to promise me 2 things. Make sure my children know me. Take me back to Bedford.
I said a prayer every night, unfortunately. I knew that the situation, I knew he was in a quite dangerous situation. Matter of fact, he corresponded with Jack, and I knew that he was in Ambar Province, and there was combat going on there.
Captain Matthew Tracy called me on satellite phone from Iraq. Captain Tracy told me that Josh and his squad almost got this sniper, a mercenary, who had shot several Marines from the prior battalion. Josh fired several shots at him, almost got him, and was about to shoot him and kill him when the sniper dove into a crowd of Iraqi civilians, and Josh stopped firing. And that was on Saturday, and the sniper killed Josh on Tuesday. When we lost Josh, we thought he should go to Arlington, and they told us that could be done. And so when Erica was with us, we said, hey, maybe he really didn't mean he wanted to go back to Bedford. And she said, well, I don't know where he wanted to go, but I'll tell you this. He had everything written out in his will specifically to the dotted I and crossed T, except for one thing. And when the attorney asked us where he wanted to be laid to rest, he simply said to the attorney, tell him to ask my father. He'll know what to do. One reason that we thought it would be better not to bring Josh back to Bedford to be buried is because he had spent a lot of time here, but he had not grown up here. My worry for him a little bit was that, we'd come here and it would just be, family, and that would be it. And I thought Josh's sacrifice, had earned and deserved more than that. All the schools had been let out, and that was what we saw going from the church to the cemetery, and it was absolutely overwhelming. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Bedford townspeople lining the streets with American flags.
Even though this fellow wasn't a Bedford native, he had some pretty significant Bedford connections, and we still consider him one of our fallen.
And I think what touched the town was the fact that Josh asked to come here. Insisted, really. Josh probably knew what a sacrifice the people of Bedford made.
And he probably figured that if he was going to make a sacrifice, it would be most appreciated in Bedford. And I think that day, that was borne out. So Josh made another good decision.
Right. Hey. Foul from the left. Mark.
My family history for being in the military goes back all the way to Roy and Ray Stevens. They're my first cousins, 3 times removed. I'm Charles Shepard. My age is 19. I've lived in Bedford County for about 13 years. I'm an infantryman in Alpha Company 1st and 116th, based out here in Bedford. I'm supposed to deploy within this year, going to the Middle East. I wanted to be at Roy's funeral. It's something that I knew I needed to do. Me and Sergeant Bartels, we were the ones that picked up the flag off the coffin. Major Wentworth presented to Roy Stevens' wife. I don't think the people today are any less patriotic than they were 60 years ago at all. Now, not many people are making sacrifices except the ones that have loved ones deployed overseas. But back then, everybody had to make sacrifices.
I had a wonderful experience the last time I went. I saw this soldier. He was a German soldier. He had cancer. He came back to the American cemetery and was visiting all the men's graves. That was the last thing he wanted to do in his life. And he had been there when these men were killed and probably killed some of them. I probably cried telling you this, but he and I just embraced Bedford's grave.
I think over the years that I've felt some sort of responsibility for taking those men to their deaths. They were pleasant lads looking forward to their first operation. But I don't think they expected what they got.
My husband gave his life in the venture of making the world better. A war seems to be inevitable, but it also seems to be rather fruitless.
We all hoped that this war would end all wars. A war is the worst thing anybody can do. I really believe that most people that die in war have died in vain because we just keep having wars.
It's a question of the results, how people deal with it. Why did my son die? Or why did my father die? Why did my granddad die? Am I living a life that is a tribute to what they've given? Do I make it in vain? Or do I make their sacrifice worthwhile?
I really miss my brothers, and I'm very proud of them. And no, I don't think they died in vain. Hitler had to be stopped. And I think that my brothers, along with many other men, had a part in that. Some man wrote a song one time about that, and he said, "Where have all the young men gone?" So you think about that. We lost a lot of young men, but life goes on.
Morning, man. We got 3 buses. Once I turn you over to your platoon sergeants, you want to go ahead and get the equipment loaded up from the corridor onto the bus?
Because 400,000 American soldiers got killed during World War II. When you think about those boys, if they had got back, what could have happened? The things that might have been.